I just want to look into a capacity around COVID, first of all, because we know the situation's so much better than it used to be, but we've got JobKeeper ending in March and still the likelihood there'll be some restrictions, which are still a big handbrake on capacity, right?
Absolutely, Tom. Look, at the moment, in some states, such as sort of Western Australia and the Northern Territory, we're back to pretty well, full capacity. But in many of the larger states, we're stuck at 1 in 2, which roughly translates at about 50% capacity. So that means that the capacity of the business to generate revenue is much more difficult. We've probably got a lot of our workforce back, but the big concern, especially when JobKeeper finishes, is underemployment. Because if we're stuck at the capacity now, where in New South Wales and Victoria they're only generating 50% of what they did this time last year, that's not going to translate in enough hours to keep enough people going, and JobKeeper's really underlying that at the moment.
I mean, what's the best you feel like you can get to in various conversations of capacity before a vaccine's rolled out along, if not to everyone, to a large percentage of the population, which presumably could be late in 2021?
Oh, simply the simple test is the days since the last case occurred. I think Christmas is going to be the big test. Christmas is obviously a time that people get out and enjoy themselves and share time with each other. So hospitality venues are going to be looking to accommodate all those people. If we can get through Christmas, if the QR code tracking that we have in place works, if the contact tracing works, I think that puts us in a really good position for governments to be able to ease the restrictions even more, and that's even ahead of a vaccine.
So would you hope you could get back to full capacity before a vaccine? Is that a hope? And presumably when you're pushing for this, what are state governments saying?
Well, I think that if you look at Australia, the 25 million people here now, COVID's pretty well been wiped out. The only risk we have is from returning quarantine travellers. They're going in and spending 14 days in quarantine, so provided the states get that right, we'll all be safe. Now, if we're all safe, there is no reason that once we get into sort of that February period where people are going back into work and looking to have coffees at work and beers after work, that we shouldn't be looking towards being back to full capacity.
All right. What's your view on premiers? And their approach seems to be, if you particularly look at WA and Queensland, let's just have an absolute zero approach on borders, so eradication basically, but they say that they'll be able to, open things up more as a result. What's your view on that? Is it affected much by, the industry affected much by people not being able to get into Queensland and WA?
Oh, Tom, look, I think especially if you look at the accommodation sector now, when you go to an airport 2 weeks ago, there was no one at the airport. Now the airports are significantly far more busy. That's going to put people into our accommodation hotels. Travellers have to stay somewhere. So that's great, because most of those hotels now are about 30% capacity. If we pursue this, and I'll call it reckless zero case, well, that will just destroy the economy. We need to do what New South Wales has done. They've been held up as the gold standard. They've been managing between 7 and 14 cases at different times during the year, and they've done so successfully. So we need to concentrate on hotspot areas and not worry about this blanket bans on activity.
So reckless in an economic sense is what you call it?
So reckless, well, it is. It's to say that if you end up with one case, that you shut down a whole state. We don't know where they're going to draw the line now, but I think I've just heard the Queensland Minister say that Queensland would be closed to South Australia if there was another case in South Australia.
If there's one case.
And you say there's one unattributed case, and we just sort of think, well, that does seem to be going too far. When a state like New South Wales has had far more liberal trading restrictions and sort of passenger movements, and has got through this successfully.
The voters seem to mostly be ticking it off, though, don't they?
Well, they're voting with their feet. As I say, if you go to an airport now, everyone's getting back on planes. People are a lot more safer. The most impressive thing for me is that they've adopted QR code and been happy to provide their details to businesses. So when an outbreak does occur, the contact tracers are able to get hold of people and identify those that were in a premise that need to be isolated.
I want to talk about IR changes, so we're getting a sort of drip of what's happening here. The latest is this so-called flex casual. People to be able to get more hours but not at overtime rates. When would a pub use this? We have it now. So we're one of the awards that already has what we call flexible part-time. It's fantastic. If you think about a casual worker, they don't have any certainty of hours.
with flexible part-time, a person can agree with their employer the number of hours, the number of days or the type of day that they work and the number of hours. So if you look at a two-parent family, one person might be working traditional 9 to 5, the other partner might say, well, look, I'm only available, on weekday evenings and on weekends, and I want a minimum of 20 hours. Now, that can be put into the agreement. Most importantly then too is that they can be rostered up from that, provided both parties agree, to say work another 10 hours, but it's at normal rates. Now, if that was going to be at overtime rates, at 150%, that person wouldn't be offered that work. So it's working in our system already, in our award already, and we think what the government's done, we can tell you that our workers enjoy it.
So, because from a worker's point of view, you might think, well, maybe someone would have got that shift. If a pub's really busy, it would have got that shift, but now they're only getting it at a reduced pay rate. So,
it's not a reduced pay rate, it's the pay rate that they would have...
Yeah. Compared to overtime.
Yeah, look, as I say, it's working an hour award. Someone's guaranteed 20 hours and works another shift and picks up another 8 hours work, they get paid the same rate. If that had to be paid at overtime rates, well, the employer would go and hire someone at a cheaper rate.
Right, but they can turn that down if they want.
They can turn it down, and all I can say is that our employees love it, and they're all asking now for flexible part-time.
Casuals requesting permanent work. This is a huge issue for a lot of people around the country in terms of being permanent. According to what we've been briefed, and we don't have the legislation yet, so they've been there for 12 months. They've had regular shifts for 6 months. The employer, the boss, has to offer them a permanent role. If they don't, the employee can go to the Fair Work Commission. But the Fair Work Commission doesn't have the power to make the boss give them that role. I mean, what's the point of that then?
Once again, we have that in our award already. It works slightly differently that at the moment, and this will change, but the employee after 12 months can request from the employer to shift to part-time, which is fixed employment. If that's not going to work for the employer, he's able to refuse that request, and the employee can go to the Fair Work Commission.
What happens at the moment when they go to the Fair Work Commission?
Not many. We've seriously only had a couple of employees request to shift from casual to flexible part-time to fixed hours. Most people, if they're on casual rates, are happy with that. They want the flexibility.
What do you mean, a couple of people out of tens of thousands of workers?
Tens of thousands. So the offer has been there and it really hasn't been taken up. This could well change now that the employer has to offer it.
Right, but again, that process, I mean, what we've been briefed out, the Fair Work Commission, it goes to them, but they can't then demand the employer finds a solution. I mean, if you're going to have that process, don't you need the Fair Work Commission to be able to say, right, I've assessed whether this is reasonable or not. It's not reasonable for you to withhold permanent work. You have to offer a permanent job. Would you accept that?
Yes, that's how the system works now. As I say, we've already got this in our award at the moment. So the government's actually picking up something that we have, changing it slightly, and implementing that.
All right. Well, we'll wait for the details on whether there's that sort of force point, I suppose, but appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.